My parents always favored my golden siblings. Now that I'm rich, they come begging for forgiveness. I was always the black sheep in the family, the outlier who never quite fit in. My brother, Dave, now 43, was a model of stability, a construction company owner known for his hard work and practical approach to life. He had spent years building a reputation in the local community, one that was solidified by his meticulous attention to detail and commitment to quality. His hands were calloused from years of labor, and he wore his blue-collar identity with pride. My sister, Laura, now 39, had climbed the corporate ladder to become the CFO of a major logistics firm, earning respect and admiration from colleagues and family alike. Her quick wit and sharp business acumen made her a force to be reckoned with in boardrooms, and she often regaled us with tales of her latest business triumphs. They were the golden children, the ones who brought pride to my parents. Meanwhile, I was Nick, the youngest at 32, who dared to dream of entrepreneurship, an ambition that felt increasingly distant amidst their achievements. My parents had always regarded me with a mixture of disappointment and confusion, unable to grasp my desire for independence. "Why don't you just get a real job?" my dad would say, his tone laced with the kind of disappointment that cut deeper than any criticism. My mom would often shake her head, her voice tinged with frustration as she added, "It's time you stop chasing fantasies and settle down, like Dave and Laura." I felt like a ghost at family gatherings, unseen and unacknowledged, trapped in the shadows of their successes. For years, I poured my heart into trying to make something of myself. I failed twice with my first two businesses. First, a small e-commerce store selling homemade goods, which flopped due to lack of marketing and an oversaturated market, and then a digital marketing agency that crumbled under poor client management and economic downturns. Each venture collapsed, leaving behind the remnants of shattered dreams and a bruised ego. But my third venture, a tech consulting firm, finally started to gain traction, and for the first time, I felt like I was on the cusp of success. I moved back home to save money, pouring every ounce of energy into this business, determined to prove myself to my family and, more importantly, to myself. I lived in the basement of my parents' house, surrounded by the clutter of childhood memories and echoes of laughter that once filled the space. Working 12-hour days, I felt like I was racing against time. My siblings basked in the praise I so desperately craved, regaling our parents with stories of their accomplishments while I felt increasingly invisible. Family gatherings became an exercise in endurance, filled with laughter and tales of triumph, each story a reminder of my perceived failure. After 3 grueling years of relentless work, my consulting firm began to flourish. Clients were coming in steadily, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe. I envisioned a future where my name was known, where I could finally provide for myself and earn the respect I had been denied for so long. It felt within reach, tantalizingly close. But just as things were looking up, my parents blindsided me with a demand I hadn't seen coming. One evening, after an exhausting day of meetings, I sat down to dinner, looking forward to a rare moment of familial camaraderie. Instead, I was met with an unexpected ultimatum. "Nick," my dad said, his voice steady yet cold, "we've been more than patient with you. It's time you start pulling your weight around here. You need to start paying rent." I stared at him, shocked and bewildered. "I've been living here for years. Why now?" "Dave and Laura didn't pay rent when they lived here." "That was different," my mom interjected, her expression a mixture of annoyance and resolve. "They had real jobs. They weren't freeloading off us like you've been. It's time to step up, Nick." My heart sank. It felt like betrayal, a slap in the face when I had finally started to succeed. I felt the weight of disappointment pressing down on my chest, and I couldn't help but wonder why they saw my success as a burden instead of a triumph. "How much?" I asked, feeling both defeated and cornered. $1,500 a month, my dad stated matter-of-factly, as if it were a completely reasonable request. While the amount was more than fair for a place of my own, considering I was still living in their basement, it felt like an unreasonable expectation, especially after all I had been through. But in that moment, I agreed, begrudgingly, hoping that perhaps this would finally earn me the respect I had been denied for so long. I was desperate to prove myself. Not long after I started paying rent, my parents began asking for additional financial help, turning what was meant to be a step toward independence into a never-ending cycle of financial dependency. The first time it happened, it felt subtle, almost innocuous. "Nick," my mom said one evening, her voice slightly tremulous, "the house needs a new roof. It's going to be expensive and, well, you're making good money now. Can you help us out?" I felt obligated, torn between familial duty and financial reality. So I paid for it, a hefty sum that drained my savings. Thousands of dollars for a roof over a house that I had grown to resent. But that set a dangerous precedent, one I didn't realize I was setting. Soon they were asking for more. First, it was the roof, then it was utilities, then property taxes. Every time I opened my wallet, it felt like I was giving a piece of my independence away. I complied, even though it was glaringly obvious that Dave and Laura weren't being asked to contribute. The disparity gnawed at me, an invisible wound that festered with each passing day. Then came the request for money to help Dave out with his business troubles. My parents, desperate to keep their golden child afloat, turned to me for assistance, expecting me to chip in to help keep him from sinking. "I know you have the means to help your brother," Dad said one day, a hint of urgency in his tone. "He's hit a rough patch. We're all family here. You need to do your part." I felt the familiar frustration bubbling up inside me. "What about my struggles? What about my sacrifices?" I shot back, but my voice was drowned out by their pleas. After all my help, I felt cornered into a role I hadn't chosen. I lent Dave over $20,000 to try and keep his company from sinking, thinking it would solidify my place in the family narrative. I also helped Laura with $10,000 when she was let go during a company downsizing, hoping to secure my position in their eyes. I wanted to believe that by helping them, it would bring us closer, that perhaps they would finally see me as an equal. But I was a fool. Eventually, the demands for money grew too overwhelming. I had already given more than my fair share, but the requests never stopped. My success seemed like a license for them to bleed me dry, their expectations rising with each new contract I secured. When my parents asked for money to cover Dave's mortgage, I finally felt a fire ignite within me. I was done. I had given them everything I could, but I couldn't keep sacrificing my own future for their failures. It was time to stand my ground. "I can't keep doing this," I said firmly, my voice steady but my heart racing. "I've helped all of you, more than enough. I worked hard for this, and I'm not responsible for everyone's problems anymore." That's when the dynamic shifted. My parents, who had always treated me as the black sheep, now saw me as a traitor, someone who had turned his back on family. "We raised you," my mom hissed, her face flushed with anger. "We sacrificed so much for you. And this is how you repay us." "You didn't believe in me when I was struggling," I replied, my heart heavy with the weight of unspoken words. "Now that I've made something of myself, you want to take everything. I'm done." A few weeks after I cut them off financially, whispers of my supposed unethical business practices began to swirl around me like a toxic fog. It started innocuously enough, a comment from a client who had heard something about me, but soon it spiraled into a tidal wave of deceit. Clients whispered about how I was overcharging and taking advantage of people, rumors that spread like wildfire in the small community I operated in. I was stunned when a longtime client pulled out of a major contract, citing concerns about my integrity. At first, I thought it was standard competition trying to undercut me, but when I traced the source of the rumors, my heart sank into the pit of my stomach. The slander originated from my own family. My parents and Dave, the very people I had supported through thick and thin. They were spreading lies, trying to ruin my reputation because I refused to keep giving them money. I couldn't comprehend how they could turn on me like this. The betrayal felt like a dagger twisting in my gut. I confronted them one evening, a tense atmosphere hanging heavy in the air. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice shaking with disbelief. "Do you think this is going to make me give in? It only makes me want to fight harder." Their expressions were a mix of anger and indifference. "You're not the person we thought you were, Nick," my dad replied coldly. "You've changed. You think you're better than us now that you have a little success. We're just trying to protect our family's name." Their campaign of slander was relentless. They made false claims on social media, painting me as a fraud, someone who had exploited their way to the top. They reached out to my clients, sabotaging relationships I had worked tirelessly to build. Each falsehood felt like another blow to my already fragile sense of self-worth. I felt the walls closing in on me, and with every lie I could feel my world crumbling. The slander reached a point where I realized I had no choice but to take legal action. I hired a lawyer, gathering evidence of the lies and documenting the damage they had caused. It was a painful process, and every piece of correspondence was a reminder of the betrayal. My heart ached with each email I read, each post I saw from my parents that twisted the narrative into something grotesque. As the lawsuit began, the emotional toll was immense. It felt surreal to be suing my own family. I had thought that blood was thicker than water, but their actions shattered that belief. The courtroom became a battlefield, with my family on one side and me on the other, both sides armed with evidence and testimonies. I was anxious but determined, ready to defend my name against the people who had nurtured me only to turn against me when I needed them the most. When the day of the hearing arrived, my heart pounded in my chest as I sat at the plaintiff's table. My lawyer presented evidence, Social media posts, messages from clients, and testimonies from witnesses who spoke about the comments my parents had made, all aimed at tarnishing my name. I could feel my heart racing, the weight of each accusation feeling like a physical blow. But my parents countered with their own narrative, claiming I was exploiting my success and had become arrogant. They painted me as a spoiled child who had lost sight of his roots, and as I listened to their words, anger and heartbreak intertwined within me. I was fighting not just for my business but for my sense of self, my dignity. I felt like a gladiator in an arena, battling against the very people who were supposed to love me. When the judge finally delivered the verdict, it felt like a weight had been lifted but also a new burden had been placed on my shoulders. The ruling was in my favor, declaring my parents had indeed slandered me, causing significant emotional distress. They were ordered to pay damages, an amount that didn't come close to what I had lost, but it was validation nonetheless. But the fallout was immediate and devastating. My parents' financial struggles deepened as the court ruling forced them to sell their house, which had been their home for over 2 decades. I heard rumors that they had moved into a small, run-down apartment, struggling to make ends meet. My dad, once a proud man, took to drinking, drowning his sorrows in cheap alcohol. My mom had to pick up a part-time job at a local diner, an unthinkable situation for her, given her previous lifestyle. Their resentment toward me boiled over, and I became the scapegoat for all their problems. My dad posted about me on social media, depicting me as an ungrateful son who had ruined their lives. My mom joined in, sharing sad stories of their financial struggles while painting me as a villain who had abandoned his family. The extended family, who had once been supportive, started to turn against me, believing the distorted narrative my parents created. Every comment stung. "How could you do this to your parents?" they would say. "Family is everything." I felt isolated, the weight of their judgment pressing down on me, but I was resolute. I knew the truth, and I began to share my side of the story. I reached out to family members, explaining the circumstances, sharing evidence that showed the manipulation and deceit my parents had orchestrated. At first the reactions were mixed. Some believed my parents, clinging to the narrative they had been fed. Others listened, and slowly, the tide began to turn. My honesty resonated with some of my family members, who started to see my parents for who they truly were, people willing to sacrifice their son for their own selfish desires. Amidst the chaos, Laura called me one night, her voice shaking as she revealed news that sent shockwaves through me. "I'm pregnant," she said, tears barely contained. I felt a rush of emotions, concern, surprise, and a flicker of hope that this might bring us closer together. "What are you going to do?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know, Nick," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I'm scared. I've always had my life planned out, and now, this changes everything." The news turned her world upside down. Laura had always been the one with everything figured out, and now she felt adrift, lost in the turmoil of impending motherhood. I found myself in a role I hadn't anticipated. Supportive brother, the one who had been through his share of struggle and was finally ready to be there for her. In the weeks that followed, I reached out more, offering my help and support. Despite the rift between us, I couldn't help but feel protective of her. I wanted to ensure she felt secure as she navigated this unexpected turn in her life. We talked about her fears, and I reassured her that I would be there every step of the way. As we shared late-night conversations, something shifted in our relationship. The walls that had built up between us began to crumble, and I realized how much I missed having a sister I could connect with. I shared my own struggles, how I had felt like a failure for so long. In turn, she shared her insecurities about being a new mother, her worries about whether she could handle it all. When her baby shower approached, I made a point to attend, determined to show her that despite everything, I still cared. Seeing her surrounded by friends and family, her joy palpable, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was the beginning of a new chapter for us. One where we could support each other rather than compete. The birth of Laura's daughter brought a sense of unity we hadn't experienced in years. I watched as she embraced motherhood with fierce determination, her love for her daughter shining brightly. I found myself visiting often, lending a hand whenever I could, and through those moments I began to heal my own wounds. In the weeks and months that followed, our bond deepened, the love of family overshadowing the shadows of the past. We began sharing more of our lives, navigating the complexities of adulthood together. For the first time, I felt like I had a sibling by my side, not just a competitor in the family hierarchy. Dave, however, remained distant. His business struggles persisted, and he seemed more consumed by jealousy than ever. As Laura and I grew closer, I could sense his resentment growing. One evening, he confronted me at a family gathering, his words sharp and cutting. "You're just using her to make yourself look better," he spat. She's going to see you for who you really are, a failure. I felt anger bubble up inside me, but I managed to keep my cool. You're the one who's failing, Dave. Maybe if you spent less time worrying about me and more time on your own problems, you wouldn't be in this mess. The confrontation marked a turning point, and from that moment on, I vowed to be a better brother to Laura, while also distancing myself from Dave's toxic energy. Laura supported me, and together, we stood firm against the negativity, creating a protective bubble around our newfound relationship. As the months rolled by, I began to hear whispers about our grandparents. They had always been the bedrock of our family, offering support and stability. But when the slander campaign escalated and my parents' financial troubles became public knowledge, our grandparents made a difficult decision. They cut my parents off. My grandparents had always cherished the values of hard work and integrity, and they couldn't bear to watch their son and daughter tarnish the family name. The news hit my parents hard, and their desperation grew as they struggled to make ends meet without their parents' support. In the aftermath, I reached out to my grandparents, sharing my side of the story and explaining how things had transpired. To my relief, they listened, their understanding eyes absorbing the pain of the past few years. I could see the sadness in their faces as they processed the betrayal my parents had inflicted upon me. They reassured me that they believed in me and that they were proud of the person I had become despite the chaos. Through it all, I found a new sense of belonging. While my parents remained steeped in their own bitterness, I felt grateful to have my grandparents in my corner, a solid foundation upon which to build my new life. They became a crucial part of my support system, attending events, sharing stories, and offering wisdom that helped guide me through the tumultuous waters of adulthood. Amidst the chaos, I found solace in Sarah, a woman who had entered my life during one of my darkest periods. She was vibrant, with a passion for life that captivated me. We met at a local coffee shop, where she was working part-time while pursuing her passion for photography. Her laughter was infectious, and I found myself drawn to her warmth and positivity. As we grew closer, Sarah became my confidant, someone I could share my struggles with without fear of judgment. She had her own stories of family turmoil and past heartbreaks, and we bonded over our shared experiences. We explored the city together, each outing allowing me to rediscover joy in life again. Something I had thought lost forever. One evening, as we walked hand in hand along a quiet park path, I shared my dreams of rebuilding my business and creating a life where I could be proud of my choices. She listened intently, her eyes shining with encouragement. "You're already doing it," she said softly. "Just keep believing in yourself." The support of my siblings, grandparents, and Sarah created a new family dynamic, one where love and understanding replaced competition and resentment. It felt liberating to embrace a new identity, one that was separate from the expectations my parents had placed upon me. As I continued to rebuild my life, my parents' situation worsened. The losses piled up and their anger turned inward, consuming them. They would often lash out at each other, blaming one another for the financial ruin they had brought upon themselves. I watched from a distance, my heart heavy but knowing that I couldn't be their savior. One final confrontation occurred during a family event at our grandparents' house. My parents arrived, visibly agitated, and their bitterness hung in the air like a dark cloud. When they spotted me and Laura laughing together, the tension escalated. My dad stormed over, his face twisted with anger. "You think you're better than us? You're nothing without our support," he yelled. I felt the heat rise in my chest but held my ground. "You've done nothing but tear this family apart. I'm proud of who I am and what I've achieved, and it's not because of you." With that, I turned to Laura, taking her hand in mine. "I'm building a life for myself now, and I refuse to let you drag me down any longer." As I walked away, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. I was finally free. In the months that followed, I focused on my business, embracing new opportunities and nurturing the relationships that truly mattered. The fog of the past began to lift, replaced by the clarity of purpose. I poured my energy into my work, and slowly but surely, my consulting firm transformed into a thriving enterprise, built on a foundation of integrity and hard work. Laura, now thriving as a new mother, often called me for advice, and I cherished our growing bond. We navigated the complexities of family together, offering support when it was needed most. And as I stood at the threshold of a new chapter, I was finally ready to embrace the future with open arms, having reclaimed my life from the shadows of the past. I learned that family is not solely defined by blood but by the bonds we forge through love and understanding. And as I looked forward to new horizons, I knew that I had the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead, emboldened by the knowledge that I had built a life of my own choosing, free from the shackles of the past.